Welcome to Writing in This Moment, current events, cautionary tales, and catharsis. We have Willie Carver Jr., we have Cusenza, we have McMan, and Glen Vecchione.
Close.
I am your humble moderator.
Close.
And you're so damn good looking.
I thought that rather than me reading a boring bio,
Oh no, don't make us introduce us.
lovely panelists, I thought what I would do is be to let them introduce themselves.
Oh no.
But
Oh dear.
Oh
you
no.
also have to add, if it's writing in this moment, please tell me what you think this moment is.
Oh dear.
That's
Word,
the opening question.
whatever.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, since Willie is all the way there at the beginning slot, we'll start with Willie.
Great.
All right, and do I start with the moment or myself, or do I make myself?
Is there
the
a
moment?
difference?
Yes.
Your choice.
We are writing in a moment. We are living in a moment of rising fascism for sure, of anti-trans, anti-queer, anti-black, anti-brown, anti-woman, anti-everyone who isn't cis-white, able-bodied male. But I think we're also writing in a time when there is a large number of people in the United States lacking courage, specifically lacking the courage to decide which story they want to tell and which story they want to live in, which story they want to share. So for me as a writer, I take very seriously the idea that I'm contributing to a larger body of stories that's going to determine what this moment is, and more importantly, in some ways, what the next moment is. I'm a big gay hillbilly, from writing out of Eastern Kentucky, the author of Gay Poems for Red States. I was the Kentucky Teacher of the Year in 2022. Thank you. And as I mentioned, I'm a big gay hillbilly, so that did not end in some ways well. It ended in violence, but it also ended with me deciding to spend my time advocating for Black, brown, and LGBTQ youth and writing. So that's me now. I'm also the author of Tore All to Pieces, and I have this giant cardboard thing, so I'm going to pick it up anytime that I can because the press told me to.
That's the large print edition.
Yes. And a forthcoming Mothman novel.
Did you say mafia?
Mothman, but I like
Oh,
Mafia
sorry.
too.
My name's Ann McMan. I'm actually Willie's fluffer. Which tells you everything about him and nothing about me. I feel, honestly, I know this is going to sound like obsequious as fuck, but I feel so unequal to this moment. I mean, this is my first time at Saints and Sinners, and I'm absolutely humbled by the caliber of talent and the voices present here. It's just remarkable, and I'm so honored to even be in this space. I think, being probably arguably near the end of my life, writing career, maybe, I don't know, who knows. Writing in the moment becomes more precious for me, and I think as time goes by, it, particularly with the world we're living in, it becomes even more important to just tell the truth. And that's what I'm really endeavoring to do in everything that I write now. I typically write humorous fiction, humorous Southern fiction. So, I mean, that's kind of me. And I noticed little details, like last night we took an Uber to the welcome party, and I felt like Miranda Priestley. It was like, I want the driver to drop me off at 6:30 and pick me up at 6:42. But, it's like I can't stop noticing little details, like the fact the driver was calmly in that insane, psychotic traffic, just eating sunflower seeds. Right?
Nice
I know.
detail.
I know, right? That's what I thought. That's our job. So anyway, that's me. Enough about me. What do you think about me?
You got through that, and you didn't even mention the two-time Lammys.
Oh yeah, there's that. That happened. Back to different categories. Try that. What I really want is the Pillsbury Bake Off. I never give up hope.
Yes, well, we all shine in our own ways.
Don't we? You do.
Yes.
Fashion, fabulous.
Well, everyone is a star. We all shine on for a few early 70s cliches or late 60s.
Like the moon, the stars, and the sun.
So I'm Vinny Cusenza. Last year I was a novitiate at Saints and Sinners, and now I feel like I'm sitting with my family, so I thank everybody here for making me feel that way. Michelle Carlsberg, who some of you may know, asked me last spring, or winter, I guess it was, if I wanted to be a panelist. And I responded as if she were making a joke, because I thought it was inconceivable that I would be up here talking. And now it's an honor and a pleasure.
You belong here.
So, I've just written my debut novel, Blood and Soil, which is also upstairs at the bookshop. I've had a checkered career. I guess I can limit myself to a few of the lighter moments, which are that my bio includes such gems as herding rhinos, sharing a stage with Liza Minnelli in Central Park before, 50,000 people, honoring the dearly departed spirit of Nico, my transsexual cat. And that's a whole story, the transsexual part. But in any case, what I feel about this moment is a profound loss of faith in our shared humanity, and how we are going to rebuild that kind of trust on a societal level, and what we need to do one person at a time every day to rebuild that. And I do think and hope that some of the themes that I have tried to be faithful to in my writing will help to do that, illuminate the issues and make people feel on an emotional level how important that is.
Excellent.
I'm Glen, Vecchione, and to be honest, when I saw that I was on this panel, I was wondering why. I mean, here I am on this panel. I'm not sure why, but I wasn't sure my novel, Where the Nights Smell Like Bread, addressed the issue, but I will do my best. I have been writing on and off for the past 30 years. My writing background is technical. I wrote science, math, physics books for kids for the past 30 years. I was a VP of a big telecommunications company called Qualcomm in San Diego. And when I retired, I began to write fiction and poetry. I was lucky enough to be a finalist in the poetry competition here. And my first novel was completed in 2025, and that was my first year at Saints and Sinners. So it's nice to be back. Yeah. So, I'll do my best. I'll do my best to kind of address the topic. So as far as what this current time means to me, for me, it's all about survival. I mean, it's working through the gloom and being able to find the energy and the optimism to write. I think at its core, creativity is optimism. You are creating something, which means you believe in a future. So I think the very act of sitting down and writing, whether or not you happen not to be particularly successful that day, the very act of sitting and attempting to write, to create something is an inherent belief in the future. So that's what I try to do, even if I'm absolutely devastated by the news, which has gotten worse and worse, it seems. I just have to keep going, and writing is it's my life jacket, you know. So that's why writing is important to me. Thanks.
What strategies do you use to push this political context that we're this political era or non-political era that we're in? How do you push that to the background in order to let your creativity flow into the work that you're doing? Because obviously, all four of you are still writing, and nobody's been paralyzed. How do you keep from being paralyzed? Willie?
Well,
For me, honestly, it's concern for the people around me. I come from Eastern Kentucky, from Appalachia, where it's not the queer folks who are the only ones who are suffering. It's sort of everyone around me who is suffering in some way, and so wanting to write them, wanting to witness them. Sort of becomes, I don't know, it's at the front of what I'm doing. It's witnessing people. And I think when things become people-centered, whatever the king is doing to us is what the king's going to do to us. The people matter all the more. And so for me, the writing then matters all the more. Because I want to witness before I'm silenced, witness before I can't witness.
I guess I think, you know, if you think about real life, if you're a writer, real life is the huge hunk of granite that's dropped into the river of what you're working on. And one way or another, the water is going to move around it, over it, past it, you know, so it needs to be woven into, mixed metaphor here, but it needs to be woven into the fabric of whatever you do. So we can't really ignore it. And I mean, if there are any people on the planet who better understand what it's like to feel unseen, unvalued, not listened to, it's us, right? So we have, I think, particularly in this moment, a unique opportunity and a voice that can really speak in important ways to what the rest of the country certainly is feeling now in tandem with us.
Well, I have, I guess, two responses to the question. One is to compartmentalize and to be disciplined on how much of the daily disasters I allow through my door or into my ears. I'm a news junkie and have been for decades, and it's very hard to reprogram the instinct to pop out of bed and press the button and listen to the headlines. So that's something I have learned to be better at in the last 15 months or so. But the other way that I think I cope with it is to channel it into a feeling or a set of feelings that drives me to want to speak through my writing to what's going on. And in my case, I chose historical fiction. It's too long to go into, but I began my writing process for this novel about 10 years ago. So this is before the great leader descended the golden escalator. But it was at the point where we had already had Michael Brown and all the exposed horrors of biased policing and Black Lives Matter coming to the fore. So there were many things along the way that flowed into the sort of the energy that I was putting into my book. By the time I finished, having started with a simpler premise of a romance complicated by local bias and intolerance at a certain point in mid-century America, I had absorbed much about what we all went through from 2014 through 2014, 2016, 2020, to, I think, give my story and my characters more depth.
You know, storytelling for me is catharsis. It's therapy. It's a way of getting the pain, the hurt, the conflict, the anger outside of yourself. where you can control it. And my conflict is solved through my characters. That's my therapy. I don't try to speak to the world with my writing. I try to soothe myself and hope that other people can relate to that. Now, with my fiction, it's actually an autobiographical memoir. But Where the Nights Smell Like Bread began at the very beginning of when you-know-who came to power during his first term. And 2 months into that, I realized I want an escape plan. I want to leave this country, or at least I want to have the opportunity to go someplace other than this country. So I began looking for a home in Italy. I had friends there. I'd made several trips there. It took me a few years to buy one, but I finally bought a house in Umbria. I've had it for 2 years. It's my go-to place for writing. So there, I was away from the static. I was away from the news. I could take this growing anger and panic, and I could control it via this new environment and working with this my first novel, which became my first novel. So for me, it's all about controlling the panic. My characters speak to me at night. They kind of solve my problems, the way dreams solve your problems sometimes. They speak to me. They say, it's okay, this is going to work out. And I think ultimately, in the end, it will.
Mine do that too, but then at the end, they say that'll be $85. Cheap therapist.
Yeah, really.
We live in the South.
Yeah.
Very cheap.
Cheap and invisible.
Characters indeed are very important. How do you keep the character, how do you keep the person at the center when all of the political context just kind of screams for attention?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways to answer it, and so I'll answer it in one way, which is we can't really control the reception of something because we don't know what this moment means. We are trying to figure this moment out. I think of like Harriet Beecher Stowe writes Aunt Chloe. And she's talked about this. When she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, she wanted to write a character who showed the humanity of people who were enslaved. And in a lot of ways of looking at it, that book shifted the opinions of white Americans and actually, in many ways, shifted the outcome of the Civil War. What she probably couldn't have anticipated is the extent to which white people would become addicted to that symbol of a black woman as someone who nurtures them, whose job is sort of presupposed symbolically. She was writing a character as she might have known them, but she couldn't control the weight that it would become for so many people. If we fast forward to Hattie McDaniel playing Mammy and talking about that role, Hattie said, because Hattie received a lot of heat for it, why should I make $7 a week being a maid when I can make $700 a week playing one? She wasn't denying the inherent problem in a system that performed her to play a certain role, but she was also admitting that she lived within that system. So when I think about writing characters specifically, as complicated as it sounds, I think, how can I write Hattie's and not Chloe's? Which means Chloe was written as a human, and there happened to be a system around her, and character or readers are feeling something with the character while the system's around them. Hattie, on the other hand, is very much living in a system. We can write Hattie living in the system and let her be fully in control without forcing her to change it, without forcing it to be her responsibility, because I think that's often what we do. We imagine queer joy, queer hope, queer whatever, and so the character has to take on that fight for us. I'm not going to do that to a character because then we're forcing each one of us in 20 years to have to bear that symbolic weight. So I want my characters to get head in gas stations. I want my characters to try to get head in gas stations and not succeed. I want them just to be people, I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you guys don't have to go to order in order.
Okay.
Anybody can play.
Okay. Not, I could change chairs. You know, I've always thought about writing as a kind of like, I'm a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan, and one of the things I loved about what he did in his films is he would take everyday people, just totally ordinary people, and he would drop them in the middle of some truly impossible situation that you couldn't even imagine. And then he would leave them alone, and they would have to figure it out. They'd have to figure their way out of it. And I think a lot about that in the way I approach my own books. I tend to do that. I tend to subject my characters. I tend to drop them into the middle of the things that I absolutely cannot make my way through. And for me, a perfect example of that was January 6th. I was in the middle of writing the fourth book in this series, and I had an absolute deadline. My publisher would have been understanding, but my producer at Audible was Susie Bright, who really was not understanding. And I was contractually obligated to finish this book and turn, worst possible way to write. And I had no idea what I was going to do, because after January 6th, I felt like there were no paradigms that even existed for what that experience meant to all of us. I couldn't even imagine how we could put one foot in front of another and go forward. And perversely, it was the woman who narrates all my audiobooks, Christine Williams. I talked with her, and she said, no, you have to do this. I rely on you to do this. You need to take this and give it to your characters, because I want to know how they're going to figure this out. So that was what I was able to do. I don't know why I look at you as I say, like, for approval.
We've had
like,
so
was
many
that okay, Willie?
We've had so many intimate moments with the fluffing. I think it just.
I'll keep my hands on the table. It's really okay. Do you want me to take off? My aura is terribly confused. It's like, is it me? Is it him? I have no idea.
I want to jump in right after Anne, because I want to segue onto what she said. My general approach is that the more the event, whether current or historical, the more significant it is. I think the more it has to be placed into the background and humanized by characters. And I can, picking up from what you said, I can think of the Martin Amis novel, Zone of Interest, which was turned into a film. It's about a ordinary family, suburban family, the father of which is one of the high-ranking officers of this concentration camp right on the other side of a garden wall. Right. It's never named. That's right. No one ever explicitly describes what it is. We see the smokestacks burning. We hear people screaming. We hear gunshots. This family is out picking their flowers, and if the screams get too loud, they turn on the Victrola, they dance, The women, they have a little card club. The other women, concentration camp commandants' wives, get together, and their husbands come in and they put out all of these fur coats and jewelry. It's just horrific. And I think that nuanced approach gives an incredible power to the incident itself, because we see how it filters right down to daily life and how it's normalized. And we see that now, how hideous things are being normalized. So that's one example of that. Another one is, let's see, I think it was Marcelo Paiva who wrote I'm Still Here. It's about the Brazilian fascist regime in the early 70s. A father is kidnapped. He goes to work, he never comes back. And his wife spends the rest of the film looking for him. She never does find him. Again, this is understatement. This is nuance. Now, if I can even mention my own book, Where the Nights Smell Like Bread, the main character, who is now an expat living in Europe, he goes to his first New Year's Eve celebration in Spain, and it's in Puerta del Sol in Madrid. An enormous crowd of people are, close, kissing one another, celebrating this festival of 12 grapes. This is 2019. The next day he falls extremely ill, tremendous fever. No one knows what's going on. COVID is not mentioned for 2 more chapters. Because number one, my character doesn't know what it is. No one knew what it was. So in that way, I pulled it into the background so that when it finally comes out, I think it has its maximal impact. So yeah, I think humanizing crises through characters. Now that is not always the best approach. I mean, sometimes the event itself is the character. If you look at John Reed's 10 Days That Shook the World, that's about the Bolshevik Revolution. All of the characters are journalists. They revolve like satellites around this momentous event, the Bolshevik Revolution. That's the opposite approach. So both approaches can be valid in literature. But for me, I like nuance. I like putting things in the background. And thank you, Anne, for inspiring that.
God, you're so well. I love that you mentioned Martin Amis. One of my favorite books of his is Time's Arrow.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
It's a remarkable book. You start reading it, and if you're clueless like I am, it takes you a while to figure out that what he's doing is he's writing world history in reverse.
Exactly.
So that
Yeah.
things are getting untangled and not happening.
Yeah.
And occurring, and the revelation is they're almost as horrible backward as they are
Yeah,
going
it's
forward,
brilliant.
but like his thesis is, the only way to really fix and recover from the past is to undo it.
So because I set my story 65 years ago, I think I had more of an opportunity to treat my characters in my story as perhaps allegory for the present. And as I was suggesting with my last comments, the story evolved over time. It had a pre-MAGA life, and then we entered the age of MAGA. And, we're a product of our own experiences. Great artists and writers have always drawn on their times and their personal take on their times. And so more and more, I was drawing on my experience in the present to tell a story in the past. One example might be, I was trying through my characters, even though my book couldn't decide what genre it was going to be when it grew up, and so I call it a romance, mystery, thriller, historical.
Oh, well.
So, yeah.
And a rom-com.
That'll, yeah. Well, maybe that's the sequel. I don't know, but certainly it's confusing the hell out of booksellers and librarians, I think. But I wanted to explore the universality of bias and othering, and how it is an intrinsic part of human nature, and we all have the potential for both within us, and how to pull out of history examples of that in a single character where a victim becomes a victimizer. And I was drawing on a vein of American history between the Great War and on into the Cold War of German Americans who had been bitterly rejected, discriminated against, saw violence and murder, tarring and feathering, the erasure of their German American heritage in the wake of World War I, which left a deep and permanent scar on that community, which has gotten lost in the years since World War II, which provided, I don't know, and it turned the page, and we were on to a new chapter of what the history of the 20th century meant, I guess. And so, based on some surprises I found in my research about how pervasive the American Nazi movement was in the 1930s and right up to Pearl Harbor, I invented an antagonist who had started out as one of these German American victims and became an oppressor of others, partly through the trauma and insecurity of being out of power, being powerless, to becoming a power-hungry person. And the more I developed that character in the age of MAGA, the more I drew upon contemporaneous news to flesh that character out. And it became something of an amalgam between the leader of the American Nazi movement, the German-American Bund of the 30s, and then took on some of the cast of what we're seeing today based on the commonality that we had a demagogue and a strongman in the novel who can speak to a future audience, a future generation, our generation.
Keeping with, excuse me, keeping in line with the characters, how do you tell the difference between a character who is expressing an opinion and an author who is pushing an agenda?
Really good editor.
Yes.
I think the tension there is kind of a, it can't be too precious, right? You just can't let that happen. You have to really be on guard to look for that. And I was sitting here while you were talking, and I was thinking, perversely, the one I've written 16 novels, one or two good. The one thing I have never been courageous enough to do is write an unreliable narrator, which makes no fucking sense, because if there's anything I've had throughout my entire life, it's ungoddamn reliable narrators. I mean, those are the voices I know better than any. So, I kind of struggle with that, and that does relate in a way to your question, how do you make sure that it's not
I
you
would have stopped
preaching?
you had it not.
Oh, thanks, Jerry, you're so good. Anyway, that's always been my struggle. It's like, Willie, take it. This is a handoff. This is a handoff.
Hand off.
Yeah.
One, I'll completely agree having a good editor. I also find sometimes it's honestly okay for it to happen. One of the most liberating things I started doing was just writing a bunch of mammals into my stories because they can say whatever the hell they want.
And they do. And they do.
Appalachian grandmothers.
I thought that's where you...
Not
yeah.
to be confused with Meemaw.
No, but no, it's refreshing and it kind of goes to I tend to think in stories from my childhood that sort of give me approaches to how things work, especially in my poetry. A lot of poetry sort of wants to dangle above the reader so that they have to work towards something. My entire life, every time someone showed me that they loved me, they told me at the exact same time. That's how Appalachia does it. They give you food and they say, I love you, I love you. So especially when I'm writing to vulnerable populations, when I'm writing to queer youth, I'm not going to leave it unsaid. And it's important that they know, in case you didn't catch it in this poem, yes, you matter and yes, you're affirmed. And so I think when it truly matters, it can be something that you absolutely can have happen. And there's nothing like an old woman calling horse shit on other characters. I think it's allowable the same way my grandmother-in-law would knock over things at the grocery store and say horrific things, and you just let it, right? And so in the same vein, when they say good things, I think there's a little less tension. What is it the kids call it? Cringe. There's a little less cringe when it happens.
Yeah, but I think the thing you're doing there that's so inspired is it's Mama's voice, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not really your voice, not Willie's voice, right? Mama would authentically speak that truth.
Yes.
So that's why it works.
And mammals just happen to agree with me.
Well, that's really convenient.
Yes.
I can usually sense when my characters are veering off into the polemical. I kind of police my own dialogue, and I can sense the shift. It just doesn't sound like the characters anymore, or all the characters are beginning to sound alike if they're discussing the same issue. Characters are not particularly articulate, I mean, people don't explain things well. their own anger is filled with contradictions and hypocrisies. And I think it's important to build that imperfection into your political substructure if your characters are of a similar mind. I have many characters who seem to feel the same way about something, argue with one another. In Bread, people who are all on the same page get into a big fight because something is misunderstood among them. So I think, I don't know, the answer to that question isn't precise for me. I just get a sense of when it's shifting. And a big help for that is to read it aloud. Read it aloud and listen to yourself. Listen to what your characters are saying.
Yeah.
And this character, he's using words he wouldn't use. He's expressing a point of view that's way
It
too
sounds too much
polished.
like you.
It's not polished. Yeah, it's goofy. That's how I know. It's an intuitive thing for me.
Or the opposite, if they're saying something you absolutely disagree with. I try to write things that the person I don't like, I imagine them reading it.
Yeah.
Imagine them agreeing with the character. Like if I can make sure that they are like on that character side, even though I'm not.
Yeah.
That's a really
I
big
think
help.
that's really important. You have to be courageous enough to have, the anti-view, the antagonist, whoever it is, have a really sort of profound and reasonable belief in whatever they're espousing, so that your own kind of perspective, doesn't dominate. Like, who remembers in that movie Fahrenheit 451, where the TV drama that was in everyone's home, where they spoke to you by name, and yes, and there'd be like some drama thing going on, and they would go, "What do you think, cousin?" So that's absolutely important.
So I would say that whatever statement I'm trying to make has to be kept on the back burner while I build a character through backstory and flashback and how they operate in the world day to day. Makes them credible at expressing something that I'm trying to get across. One example would be, I have a multiracial love interest character, and he is from the mountains. He's a backwoods man, but he's also from a Native American tribe that has ancestral roots to the land long before colonization. But his experience in the middle of the 20th century is one that you could say is shared by all people of color, vis-a-vis who is being policed, who is being controlled, who is on the wrong side of the keep out signs. And I drew upon the history of this particular tribe, their enslavement. I'm talking about a place that's maybe 35 miles outside of Manhattan, where I spent my childhood summers. But this history it's history as opposed to historical fiction. And they were pushed off their land, and eventually retreated to their ancestral hills. And so when I was about halfway through developing the story and this character, we had 2020 and 6 months of nonstop street protests about people of color. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the issue and trying to see what parallel would have existed in 1960 that I could speak to that was authentic and true to the character. And everyone else will have to be the judge of whether I succeeded or not, but I tried very carefully to stay true to the profile, the history, and the circumstances of my character, while being very clear that I intended to speak also to this American moment. So.
And it's like, I always go back to the iconic Joni Mitchell song, The Circle Game, where she writes about what incredible poet she is, by the way, how life is really like riding a carousel, which goes around and around and around, and you pass the same view over and over and over, not just through the one life you have, but through all the lives that have gone before us. And the landscape doesn't really change, does it? So I think you can do what you sought to do and be guaranteed that there's going to be a parallel for whatever you're writing about that existed previously at any point in time.
Another thing I think you can do is you can provide a very credible counterpoint of view. You can highlight the issue by having a very likable character who expresses an opinion that may be personally egregious to you, but you're going to make this character likable and sympathetic. And I think it's a way of highlighting your issue in kind of a negative space. So I've done that. I try to write very, very likable characters who are quite frankly offensive. And it's difficult because you can get into trouble politically. Some people take it literally. I mean, is this what you really, how can your character say that? Well, this is a character, it's not me. But I mean, I think there are lots of ways of doing that, using literary devices to kind of make your point.
Yeah.
That carousel, I think especially, when you think about a recursive moment being a meaning maker. So I taught foreign language. I taught French for a very long time. And you don't teach bonjour by saying bonjour is the same as hello, and then they know it. That's not how kids work. That's not how language making works. You show them a million scenes in a row in which someone says bonjour, and they begin to build a scaffold from that textured repeating of what it means.
Right.
And so my characters are not going to sit around talking politics unless they're the obnoxious characters. Never would they do it seriously, because even in my own life, it's those times when we're sitting around talking politics that we're saying the least meaningful things. But I think with that recursive motif, if you can think about what's itching you about how power is functioning in our society, you can show that in 5 or 6 ways throughout the same novel, or you can have it repeating in short stories or in a poetry collection, so that someone figures out what bonjour means on their own. And I think most importantly is it's going to have the most staying power with the reader, and that's what you really want if you're hoping for something transformative.
When, I know that a lot of, you guys are all probably very good at this. Is it our responsibility as writers to avoid alienating readers, or is that indeed the point? Is that part of the goal?
I think we should ask the audience, honestly. I mean,
Well, they'll get their chance. They'll get their chance.
I mean, I struggle with that all the time. It's like, I mean, I use humor in my books as a foil, and I say a lot of times that I write like a boxer. I faint and dance around and act like a clown, and then I really land a punch. And, after I do that, then I back off and I do something goofy again, so I give the reader a little bit of time to, recover and absorb that. I'm not just going to get them on the ropes and keep pummeling them until they're, a bloody pulp. That's too much like my childhood. But thank you. Who said I'm sorry? Oh my God, where have you been all my life?
In this chair waiting on you.
I know, seriously, thank you. No, but seriously, I mean, so that's how I do it. It's kind of like, I'm always conscious of the reader's experience when I write. I'm an incest survivor. So, and talk about a topic nobody wants to hear about. I mean, seriously. So, I find ways to sort of incorporate some of that into the books I write, but I always do it in a way that I then give the reader a break so that it, dear blessed souls, so it's just not too much for them.
For me, the only real alienation I feel as a reader is boredom. If I'm bored, I'm alienated from a book. I just don't want to continue. So as a writer, I just try not to bore my readers. I mean, I can say outrageous things. I can really push the envelope, I think, as long as I don't bore my readers. I would rather offend them than bore them. So that's, to me, that sounds like a clumsy rubric. But for me, that's my main rubric for writing. Anything is possible. Just don't bore people.
And
I don't know. I had a therapist who always told me, this is not let me entertain you. You actually have to come in here and do the work.
And if I had to dissect parts of me, I think, like, I don't know, the person who doesn't like LGBTQ people, they're not reading books anyway.
No, they're not.
I'm not concerned about that person.
You don't worry about offending
no,
them.
you're
Yes.
not going to read it.
We think J.D. Vance is going to pick up my book. Like, I don't give a shit. That is just how I feel about that. And I think the other side is, yes, there are some lovely sofas in this novel.
Oh, dear God.
But the other side to this is I'm writing about Appalachia, and before anyone picks up my book, they've already heard a million stories. Like, every character I have, every person in real life who is represented by these characters is suffocating under the weight of 100 years of bigotry against rural hillbilly people who cannot speak without someone already making a decision about them. Nice, progressive, liberal people who don't understand how bigoted they are because they will not learn from a hillbilly. So in that case, I think I'm just going to take after Morrison and say, I cannot write for that gaze. I have to ask myself, am I responding to a world that exists in such a way that I can make these characters legible, or am I going to write my characters? So I'm just going to write their lives with dignity as they are, and hope that the sort of person who can read someone and read dignity into their story will. And for the other person, I hope they stub their toe, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Don't you think a lot of times that readers are a lot like the character Chance in Yaji Kaczynski's novel Being There, where they basically walk around with remote controls, and if they don't like what they just keep clicking to like change the channel. I mean, so I think you're right. You can't write to that group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a bit of a nightmare when approaching any writing project. The remote can click you and turn you off. But I guess on a more basic level, as a reader, I think I'm up for a challenge, and I'm looking to find a reason to connect and identify with and root for characters, and that means to find complexity in those characters, and maybe to recognize uncomfortable things about myself, but other things that I can identify with that maybe I haven't given a name to, but the author was able to articulate. And so that, for me, creates a real bond with the story and with the characters. So even, in approaching my antagonist in my novel Blood and Soil, and there's a secondary antagonist, it was all falling flat. These people were just too two-dimensional. I had to find something that was a saving grace in each of them, to find their humanity, or else I couldn't keep anybody interested in such a story. It is, as you say, it's too boring. It will not sustain your gaze. So, that's the way I think about this issue when I'm developing a character.
In Where the Nights Smell Like Bread, one of the main characters is a mixed-race American expat artist. And there are several episodes in the book where he comes up against racists in Italy and in Europe in general. And my beta readers had a difficult time with that. But it always came up in discussions about the book, and so I knew I was doing the right thing. They were uncomfortable with it, but they weren't offended. And I think it was a flavor of something in the book that was unique to them, because we think of as Americans as being racists. Well, racism exists all over the world, and sometimes it's very stealthy. It's very finessed in Europe. You see it in places you wouldn't expect, and sometimes it's quite overt, because they have the immigrant issue as well, especially in Italy. But I mean, again, this was something I wanted to bring out front and do it as delicately as I could, but at the same time be honest about it. Hopefully that it would actually highlight my feelings, quite to the contrary, about mixed race people and how they should be treated wherever they are.
Okay. Do current events affect plot more than character, or do they affect character more than plot? Anybody?
It depends where you want to aim the camera, you know? It depends on where you want to aim your camera. If you want to make the historical event a character, then, that's it. You're dealing with a big chunk of history or a current event. If you want to make your characters humanize the event, then the event goes in the background. So I think it really depends.
I think I tend to write things that are pretty character-driven. I think the first review of Toro de Pieces was, there are no explosions, and that's the point. So I was like, maybe I need an explosion in the next book. Like a really subdued literary explosion. But for me, they affect the character. I've got, for example, a woman who works at the dollar store who's just got her associates in business management, and she's so excited for a job opportunity with a local school district, and she's walking by all of these people who are getting to be seated at their jobs and who are working towards some vacation that she has never had in her life. And there are additional language requirements that are anti-LGBTQ in this job application, and she has a queer sister. And so the novel's forcing her to sit, or the story is forcing her to sit with this question about what it means to become part of a system when you're exhausted. So yeah, I think in many ways, again, she's the character. She's not going to fix this system. I'm not going to ask her to solve homophobia. But she has to wrestle with it because that's the world we're in.
I mean, it's kind of like the plot just never changes. It just doesn't. Like, no matter what century, what decade, what era you're living in, I mean, go all the way back to the Greeks, and the same things they wrote about. I mean, the same things Shakespeare wrote about. The same things Danielle Steele. Wait a minute, maybe not. The same things that are happening us today. It's like the same shit just keeps coming around. So I mean, I think we just do what we do. I don't think we have to actually anchor any of the sort of uber plot points in a particular time or decade. They're omnipresent. I mean, and they're with us always. And I have this fabulous thing Willie made me, which I'm going to treasure forever, which is a picture of my gay Anne's gay book and my turn off audience spot, which I actually kind of look like that in a dress. It's remarkable. It's really remarkable. Your boobs sort of, it's like a thing.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would say that the way that I write, I draw upon the context of the times and the stresses, the prejudices, the biases in the case of my characters, to draw upon as it suits the plot and the character's development in the story. So I was very interested in the predicament of ambitious women in the 1950s. And I count 1960 as pre-Kennedy, so all a part of that very conservative, very restrictive decade as far as social standards and mores. I drew upon the Lavender Scare fleetingly, but it built a case for what gay people were going through then and how they approached exposure, concealment, disguise, and certainly we're talking about we had yet to really reach the apex of trouble in the civil rights movement in 1960. So this is pre-Pettus Bridge March to Selma, and that came to light when I was trying to bridge the gap, or my characters were trying to bridge the gap, to see if their attraction, in spite of them having almost no point of intersection in their understanding of themselves and the other from their own lived experience, how you could make that feel like it was a part of the context of what life in the 1950s, in the Cold War, in an uber-conformist period of time felt like, but felt like through the characters and how they interacted with one another and how their ambitions were being thwarted and what it took to overcome them. So.
Okay, one more question from me, and then I'll throw it open to the audience for questions, so start thinking. How do you write a queer or marginalized character in a political moment without turning them into a symbol of their own suffering? At what point does relevant become reductive?
You make them a hero. They're the hero. If not the hero, they show heroic traits. They prevail. They're authentic. I think that's the best you can do.
That was the soundtrack. I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, they survive, they exist, which doesn't mean that they can't not survive. I mean, they're surviving in the moment that they are existing. I'm a member of the LGBTQ task force for the American Federation of Teachers, and we had this sort of venting day, and it was like, what gay thing do you not like? We had to write it on a piece of paper and then share it, and so of course there were queens who were like, primary colors, and not to sound awful, but I was like, queer joy. I'm so exhausted by queer joy. But what I mean is, I wrote I have a novel that's going before the University Press of Kentucky's board in a couple of weeks. And one of the reviewers said something along the lines of, well, I was worried for a second because I thought something bad might happen, but you let it have a happy ending, and so then you avoid any sort of negative problem. And I'm like, I know lots of queer people without happy endings.
Oh, yeah.
And I always ask, like, who am I writing for when I'm forced to write happy endings? Who am I writing for when I'm forced to write good things? I often think it's for a straight audience that doesn't want to ask, what is my responsibility here? If I know that something bad is happening, should I do something? Should I not? And the same is true for my Appalachian characters. The little girl who is in the titular story here does not have a happy ending. Plot giveaway. And someone was pushing back, and I think they said something along the lines of, she would be more multidimensional if there was a happy ending. And I'm like, is that what dimension means?
I don't think so.
No, but what I think what the reader was really saying is, I'm
delusion
uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable because we all need to be told that things are going to be okay. So for me, I think the emphasis is on survival. So one of the characters in this novel is named Jamie. He is he sells drugs. He is not a perfect person, but he also does some good things. And I let him get away from the police. I let him be savvy enough to hear the sirens and turn around and go in the opposite direction. I think it means having an audience root with this character for whatever their goals are, and not making Jamie have to be a load-bearing character. I don't need Jamie to have to, face something and win. He might not. I think if he faced it, he probably would fail from where he stands. His humanity is in the fact that he wants to keep going, and he finds ways to keep going. And so I think, yeah, I look for the texture of people, which might be, it might manifest in a specific way in a specific moment, but like Ann said, it's the same story over and over and over, right?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to, we're taught to write what we know, so sadly, that's what I do. So, I find that my characters very often are exactly like me. I mean, they're bewildered, they're confused, they're riddled with self-doubt, they're not sure if they belong, and they're all pilgrimages. They're all on a pilgrimage, slouching toward Bethlehem. And those are the characters I write because they're the people and they're not just gay, they're like everyone. So I try to write my characters to be every man, every woman, all of us, each of us.
Well, it was interesting listening to you talk about happy endings and do we need them?
Our publishers sure do need
And
them.
who's the audience for them? Because I wrote a radically different ending for my novel than the one that I originally envisioned, because I'm a hopeless romantic, and so I like these two guys, and I wanted them to get together and live happily ever after, but it just did not ring true. This was 1960. I had set up these two characters to be of such dramatically different backgrounds with completely different world views about their, under a variety of different ways you could give them an identity. And even though they were trying their hardest with the entire straight world, the institutional obstacles to their happiness, it was not going to be. And yet still come up with a hopeful conclusion that they wanted to stick it out, that they knew that the odds were stacked against them. And it became a scene full of tears and of trying to be hopeful. And you are left to by the end of the story, you're left to understand that shit, this is 9 years before Stonewall. What are they how are they going to figure this out? And that's a good place, I think, to stop in a story that's so full of societal challenges as a story set in half in Appalachia and then ultimately in Greenwich Village by the end of the story. So, but just to the point of when the issues are screaming for attention, what do you do to stay grounded in your story? I guess the only answer that I found was with my evil sheriff, with my white nationalist, card-carrying Nazi of a sheriff, that we could know that he was on the losing side in the Great War, that he lost everything, including his homeland, only to come to this country and to be treated like the enemy until he seized power for himself. That we have a responsibility to our characters to have them tell the story that we would have them lead instead of the polemic that we're trying to make for the imaginary antagonist in our lives on talk radio and opinion television. So.
I don't engineer happy endings for my novels, but I do try to have my characters come to some kind of reckoning, some kind of redemption. That's when I mention heroes. I think in my book, Where the Nights Smell Like Bread, every single character is heroic in his or her way, even the villains. And I like the fact that there's this transformation, even if it only means they become more authentically who they am, who they are, and reconcile themselves to that. So yeah, happy endings just seem false to me. I mean, this just is not an age of happy endings, really. We find happiness in other ways, coming to terms with things, finding our own personal happiness in the face of national or disaster. Our lives don't have happy endings. We die, So I just don't believe in happy endings. But I do believe in a character evolving and reaching some kind of peace, some kind of stasis, some kind of stability in who he or she is. That's my version of a happy ending.
And don't be dissuaded from reading Glen's book because it leaves you hopeful. That's my personal take.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Questions from the audience?
Don't ask Ann her version of a happy ending.
My ring is glowing.
Yes.
Something that Willie said, but then what Vinny also said just now sort of possibly answered this question. But as writers, is the onus on us to, if we have characters who would be described as our enemy, basically, somebody who is sworn to kill us, in a specific context, to treat them with empathy and sympathy and develop that more complicated? Is the onus on us to have that in our writing?
Yeah.
And it could be almost impossible to do, but.
I would say, I don't think we have any ethical onus at all. Like, you could make that person as horrible as you want. I think it's a question about the universe you're building. So if I'm, for example, building the portrait of a small town, then it matters to me that this person is as real as possible and as well-rounded as possible, because it matters to the texture of this universe. But I think there are other universes where you might be writing, and let's be honest, from the perspective of this character, this other character is a villain. And I don't feel the need to find something redeemable if that's what I'm writing. But I think it depends on the world you're writing. But there's nothing inherently unethical about just letting a bad guy be a bad guy sometimes.
I think too, like a broader question there that we all wrestle with every single day, especially now, and like in our real lives, is how do we navigate that? Like I saw this interview with Gavin Newsom a few days ago where he was saying, regardless of what your party affiliation is, he was saying the problem with Democrats is we always want to be the party of right. And now it's to our detriment, and that's the thing that's really destroying us, because we have to be willing to play more like they do. And, not just in the books I write or but in the life that I live, I really struggle with that, because it's like, what do we do in this moment, if we want to survive? But if we kind of deconstruct and become like the thing we revile, then who are we?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either. But then I'm like, what are we left with? We're going to continue to lose, is his thesis. So,
I guess I feel very strongly it's the end of us as a species if we can't cross the divide, we can't find something
I
redeeming
agree.
to.
Although
to
it's hard with Matt Schlapp. Sorry.
Yeah, well, nobody's perfect. But yeah, I mean, it came home to me very, very much in, like I've said, I had two irredeemable characters, and I had to find a reason for you to not want to skip over every mention of this evil sheriff and his out of control bad boy nephew wreaking havoc. We've come to filter our understanding of, I guess, our political life through the platform that delivers it to us, and everyone is more than a talking head and the latest outrageous thing that they said, and I mean, I don't have to look farther than my own family and my husband's family to find people who are, you know, courageous firemen and wonderful grandfathers and beautiful human beings on an interpersonal level and have what I think are heinous beliefs about the direction of our country.
Right.
And I don't want to forget that. I don't want to forget either part. So.
I always think about what Walker Percy said, his sort of epitaph for modern man. He fornicated and paid his taxes.
I think another thing that, I think a bigger question too, I think for progressive writers or whatever we want to call ourselves, that we sometimes create such really clear-cut rules about what you should do and shouldn't do, that it becomes impossible to do the messy work of getting it wrong while getting it right. David Joy, author of Those We Thought We Knew, it's a gorgeous book. David Joy looks like at any point he smells like deer urine. He is a backwoods mountain man. But in this novel, which takes place in Sylva, North Carolina, we have white characters who pretty much any reader is going to empathize with, who we realize are actually, who have to come to terms with their racism throughout the course of this novel, which has a lot of characters of color. And I heard him talk a few years ago, and someone said, but aren't you concerned, being a white man, that if you're writing black characters, then what would you say to someone who says you could get it wrong or that it's inappropriate? He said, yes. But he also acknowledged that he also is writing from a point of privilege, and there are people who will pick up his book who need to read about these things. And I think even to go back to that Uncle Tom's Cabin example, like would she have written it, or would she have been crucified by the left? And what would that have meant for the Civil War? So yeah, we have to make mistakes, and we have to do the messy work of getting it wrong so that we can also get it right.
You know, let me try to answer your question. At some point when I was writing my book, because I have many, many different characters, many different points of views, lots of conflicts, and a fair amount of violence. There's a gay bashing that takes place in Italy. There's racism that takes place in Spain, all sorts of things like that. I looked at all of my characters and I said, okay, we have all of this conflict in this book, different cultures, different ages, different genders, people conflicted all over. What do they all have in common? What do all of these characters share? And if I sort of reduced it down, I found the root cause, and the root cause was fear. It was fear. Everybody was frightened, and that became a very wonderful space to work in, because in that fear you could find solutions. You know, you feel this way. You're petrified of immigration. You feel these people are taking your jobs. You're taking. On the other hand, you know, this is, you know, I'm afraid. I'm an immigrant. I'm going to be thrown into prison. Fear. It's fear. Fear is what unites these diverse points of view, and I think that's a fertile place for solving problems, for finding redemption, for finding salvation, for finding a solution. That's the place of happy endings, if you can address that. So,
That's great.
yeah.
Okay, that's just about all the time.
Thank you. Thank you.